My friends, it's the summertime, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, and you have probably thought about running on the beach. Now, I don't know, maybe you think you're going to get a good workout running in the beach, and you probably will, but I bet that running on the beach is probably more difficult in practice than it seems when we're thinking about it. It seems nice to idealize being at the beach and going for a run. We imagine ourselves like Baywatch in slow motion. But is it really like that? Let's talk about beach running. Before we talk about beach running, I just want to tell you that this is also the weekly running and training vlog, where the main purpose of this video is for you to tell me about your week of running. I want to hear about your successes, and I definitely want to hear about those setbacks. Oh, and if you do like running, talking about running, wearing running shoes, I'd love it if you subscribe to this channel. Really. I'd love it. And of course later, when you've been watching the video for a minute, if you like it, give it a thumbs up. The best way to tell me that you've watched it and you've enjoyed the content. But with that, raise your hand if you enjoy beach running. Raise your hand if you think about beach running and you think that it's really something that you'd like to do. Of course, there are so many different beaches. Your experience beach running is going to be a lot different depending on what beach you're running on. So where I grew up in the UK, my closest beach was Brighton Beach, and there is no way that anyone was doing any running on that beach. It's a pebble beach, and running on pebbles is probably not a good idea. But there are a lot of other good beaches, including some of the beaches where I live. Now, I actually live on the west coast of Florida, and nearby are several beaches that have been voted the best beach in the world. But I've got to tell you, they're not necessarily the best beach in the world for running, but we'll get to that. So in reality, running on the beach is a challenge. And it's a challenge because sand is soft. And because that sand is soft, it absorbs a lot more of the impact than roads or trails. And because it absorbs more impact than roads or trails, every time you push off, so every step you take takes more effort than if you were running on the road or if you were running on a trail. Now, of course, if you're running on a soft trail, it takes a lot more effort to push off than it does on the road. But sand on a beach is even more so. Also, a lot of beaches, especially where I live, a beach can be slanted. You know, the ocean comes up to the sand and then the sand goes up. So if you're running down by the water, you're probably going to be running on a bit of a slanted area. And that's generally where we run when we go to the beach, because we want that water to make the sand a little firmer. Now, when I go running on Siesta Beach, I will definitely run down by the water, because when you run higher up on the beach where the sand is dry, it's just like sugar sand, and it's like running in marshmallow. And no one has any fantasies of running in marshmallow. In fact, now I think about it, the ideal beach to run on is one of those beaches where there is a big tidal plane. So when the tide's out, there is a large flat area of very hard sand. I think that would be the most pleasurable to run on. Let me know if you have any beaches like that around where you live. Unfortunately, I don't. I've got beautiful beaches, just not beautiful running beaches. So when you go for a run, you know how if you're out there for a little while, you get tired, muscles start to get sore, maybe you get sore legs. Well, all those muscles that get tired when you're running get even more tired when you're running on the beach. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's probably not the same muscles, but it's all those supporting muscles. The muscles that you don't use when you're running on the road on a regular basis, because running on the road is very metronomic. When you're running on a road, you can kind of set it and forget it. But when you're running on the beach, or probably run on trails a lot more, it's very similar. You have to pay more attention. And even if you do manage to drift off, you'll still find that you're in the moment because you're watching where your feet are going. And of course, you're probably aware of the increased effort while you're running on the sand. If you're very used to running, if you run a lot and you're aware of your speed, you will notice that when you're running on the beach, that pace is a lot slower. So my first tip for running on the beach is to not pay attention to pace, because you can't compare it to anything else. And because of that energy sucking sand, it is always going to be slower. Try not to pay attention to pace. If you're going to run without a watch, I would say running on the beach is the one time that you don't wear your watch. Of course, I wouldn't actually take that advice myself. Running without a watch seems crazy. Oh, I know, I just thought of a perfect beach for running. It's Daytona Beach. So Daytona Beach is on the other side of Florida from where I live, and that's a big flat beach, very hard, and they used to run the Daytona 500 on the sand. So you better believe that if it's good for car racing, it's definitely good for running. I'm glad I got that out of the way. I was really struggling to come up with a good beach to run on. Oh, I did get some information for this video from an article, and I will place that link in the show notes below in case you want to go and read it. But we have talked about all those little supporting muscles, the intrinsic muscles that we probably don't work out as much when we run on the road, but definitely be getting a workout when you're running on sand. But we do have to be cautious, especially if you have suffered with plantar fasciitis. That connective tissue, the actual plantar fascia, is going to be challenged when you're running on the sand. So if you have struggled with plantar fasciitis in the past, probably a good idea to keep an eye on it. But that also brings up the question of running with shoes and without shoes. And I think to answer that question, I'm going to have to say it depends. Depends on a couple of things. Look, if you have plantar fasciitis, it's probably good not to risk running barefoot, because it's going to aggravate that plantar fascia. So running in the shoes is going to give you a little more support when you're running on the sand. But there are other things to consider, like how soft is the sand. If the sand is super hard, like a Daytona, you're going to want to wear shoes to give you a little protection, because ultimately, if you're running on the beach that has hard packed sand, it's going to be just like running on the road. But if the sand is super deep, maybe barefoot is a good idea. I know a long time ago when I started running, I used to go to beach runs at Siesta Beach, and I would wear shoes or I wouldn't wear shoes, just depending on what I felt like at the time. But I do remember when I wasn't wearing shoes, I was very concerned with stepping on shells or anything like that. Sometimes there's red tide, so dead fish wash up and you don't want to step on a dead fish. But then if you wear shoes and you're running on the beach and you're running close to the water, perhaps a wave could come in and get your feet wet. Now that's fine if you don't mind your feet getting wet, but if you're trying to avoid your feet getting wet, it could be an issue. Personally, when I go to the beach, I always have a camera in hand and I am actively seeking out that time when I can get my feet wet. And for me, it's worth it to have a wet pair of trainers to get that perfect shot. So I think the best part about running on the beach is, I think, something we can all agree on, is that we're probably running in a very beautiful area. There's a reason that running on the beach has kind of a fantasy status around it, because it's really lovely. And you can run on the beach and you can look out at the beautiful ocean. You're lucky you're going to see dolphins jumping nearby. It can be a real treat. But also, aside from that, it's going to be a great workout, again, because we are strengthening those intrinsic muscles that we don't get to strengthen just with regular road running. Now, I did an ultra a couple years ago where a lot of it was on sugar sand. And so my training consisted of going to the beach and just running in the sugar sand for hours at a time. And I think it worked out pretty well. But also, even though we are strengthening those little muscles that support everything, we're also giving our body a break. So at the same time that we are strengthening muscles and we're wearing those muscles down, we're also giving our body a break because there's less impact. If you are a regular road runner, you know all about the impact of road running. And there's no denying that running on the beach is going to be less impact than running on the road. So now that I think about it, running on the beach is actually pretty ideal. You are going to get stronger while having less impact on your body, and you're going to have the mental benefits of being surrounded by beauty. Gosh, that's a win-win-win. But okay, it's not all perfect. You probably shouldn't just go and stop running everywhere else and run on the beach only. Like everything, we have to ease into it. We want our body to get used to all the demands that the beach is going to put on it, even though it's going to reduce some other demands from running on the road. Really, it's 6 of this, half dozen of the other. But if you are going on holiday to the beach and you know you want to do some beach running, and let's also say that your normal run is 10 kilometers. Well, maybe on the first day you want to go out for 5 kilometers and then come back and reassess and see how you feel. Another great idea for running on a beach, especially if you're in a strange area, is to do shorter out and backs. Because remember, running on the beach is going to be a little more tiring. Well, actually, it's going to be a lot more tiring than running on the road. So let's say you're going out for your normal 10K run and you run the 5K out, and then it's time to turn around, but you're still 5 kilometers away from where you started, and all of a sudden you're hot, you're thirsty, and now you have to walk 5 kilometers back home. Look, I know, that's a bit of a stretch. Hopefully you would have made the decision to turn around when you realized you were getting tired before you were at the furthest point of your run. But the point still stands. Just take it easy. Take it easy when you're getting into beach running. In fact, I often find when I go down to the beach, it's a drive for me, so I have to drive down to the beach. I will usually do a couple of miles on the road, maybe a couple miles on the beach to finish up. So I'm not running my entire run on the beach, but it's more like the frosting on a cupcake, you know? And we all know that the frosting is the very best part of the cupcake, but you don't want all frosting. Like, that'll make you sick. And with that, I think the emoji at the end of the video is going to be a cupcake. If I forget to mention it at the end, I'm telling you right now. So when you are running on the beach, there's just a couple things to remember. You obviously don't want to change your form, because generally that is going to lead to injury. You don't want to consciously change your form. But with that said, there are a couple of things you can do to make running on the beach just a little easier. You might want to consider taking shorter and faster steps, because longer strides are going to take a lot more work. Also, and this is probably a pretty good training tip, you're going to want to lift your knees just a little more, just because you don't want to end up shuffling through the sand. There are times at the end of a long run when I really start to notice my shuffle, and sometimes I'm running and I'll hear my feet scuff the ground. If that happens and you're running on sand, probably going to get a shoe full of sand. No one wants that. And finally, because you are probably running on the beach in the summertime, an important reminder, especially if you live in the south like me, is to get there at the very start of the day. You want to beat the heat. Look, it's hard enough running on the sand without having the full heat of the day. So go first thing in the morning, you're going to beat the heat, you're going to beat the crowds. And also, and I realize I'm talking from my experience with my local beach, but you're going to want to think about the tides. You're going to want to think about the tides because the best place to run is often closest to the water, where the water has kind of packed down the sand a bit more. Now, if you go running and it's high tide, you're going to have a very small area in which to run. If you're at low tide, you're going to have a lot more area to run. And remember, a beach is a popular place. There's a lot of people you're sharing it with. You're going to want to watch out for fishermen, photographers. If you're first thing in the morning, there's always going to be a lot of photographers there catching golden hour. It's going to be kids building sandcastles and digging holes. And if you go first thing in the morning, you have to watch out for the holes in the sandcastles built by the kids in the previous day. Look, it's funny, but it's a legit concern. And with that, I had a pretty good week of running. It started off on Monday with 10 miles. Now, Monday was a little different because I started out on an easy run. And it actually was an easy run to begin with. After the first 3.5 miles, I decided I was feeling good. And maybe I should do my intervals on Monday rather than on Tuesday. That's exactly what I did. 3.5 miles to warm up, then I did 800s with 400 meters recovery in between, and then I cooled down for half a mile. Tuesday was another 10 miles, but on Tuesday I did run very easy. And on Tuesday there was a lot of thunderstorms in the area, so I pretty much just ran loops loops around the neighborhood. And I was really glad that I knocked out the interval workout the day before, because I would have really struggled with motivation if I was just running around my neighborhood. I don't know why, it's just not easy to stay close to home. And then on Wednesday, I took a day off. And then I went into Thursday fully rested. I ran 8.2 miles, 2 miles to warm up, 5.2 miles at tempo pace, and then 1 mile to cool down. Friday, I started the morning with 10.5 miles, very easy. Then in the afternoon, because I ran in the morning and it was still dark, I needed to get some shoe B-roll. So I went out for another 1.5 miles in the afternoon just to get that beautiful shoe footage, you know? Then came my long run on Saturday. I knocked out a total of 17.1 miles, super easy. I got to run with a couple of the guys. Now, something happened. Towards the end of that run, I did start noticing a little discomfort in my left foot. I was able to run through it. I finished the run. I went home. I didn't notice anything all day. And then Sunday rolled around. On Sundays that I'm off, I do go to downtown Sarasota and I run with my local running group. So I did that. I went down there and I ran for a couple of miles before we were due to meet at 6:30. And during that 2-mile run, I did notice that my foot was still hurting just a little bit, and I was wondering what I should do. Should I pack in it? It really wasn't that painful, but there was definitely something there that felt a little dodgy. Then the group run started, and I wasn't able to actually not run. So I did run with them for a little bit. I ran out for about 2 miles before I figured I better start heading back. So that's what I did. I decided to pack it in. I knocked out a total of 6.1 miles, and I cut it short because my foot was hurting. At this point, I don't know what it was, but I think I'm going to take a couple of days off next week and see if that makes it go away. As of the filming of this video, which was about an hour after I finished the run, I've got no pain at all walking around the house. I can't manipulate my foot to find where it is, so I don't know. Write in the comments if you have any ideas. We'll do a little crowdsourcing medical care. But yeah, still a good week. 63.5 miles total, which is about 102.2 kilometers, so can't really complain. And with that, if you have made it to this point in the video, why don't you put the foot emoji in the comments so I know that you've made it all the way to the end. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.